Well, indeed, it's great to be here this morning. Particularly, I see so many great friends in the audience, and it's a delight. I was over at one of our clients this morning visiting with the president. There's two presidents at Clark Pacific, and I was talking with Don Clark, and we were talking about implementing the one-on-one there, and they've just gone through a whole lot of training. And he says, well, I've just brought on a new assistant that's going to help me make sure we stay the course. So I said, what's she doing for lunch? And Nicole this is her second day with Clark Pacific. So I figured, hey, why not? This is free training, Nicole. So she will be carrying out the responsibility at Clark Pacific in the business development estimating side of the business to make sure they stay the course. And that is the difficult part of just about any kind of change management in an organization. We come up with lots of great ideas and we start to implement them, and about 3 to 4 months down the path, we start wavering. And you think about it, diets, exercise plans, so many things that are really, really good for us. It's hard to keep doing the right stuff. So as a CEO, I discovered early on in my career that there's a lot of good things we could do. But how do we increase the probability that we're going to get the benefit of all of the initiatives? We'll talk about that a little bit more. My career sounds like I had a hard time keeping a job. But what I would do is go into an organization. I was recruited to help build the leadership team and get the business to the next level. And it usually meant, I'll give you an example. The first one was a dental insurance company up in Seattle, Delta Dental. You may have heard of them. They had just grown so fast that all of a sudden they were on their knees financially and didn't know how to get out of that pickle. So I got the invite to participate in the beauty contest, and surprise, surprise, I won, and I got to go in and help turn it around. Well, what I've learned in doing that several times is the leadership team. Whoa, number one. That leadership team, and a lot of authors share that with their readers, that if the leadership team isn't working as a change agent to keep getting better, then we're losing a big opportunity. The other thing I learned early on, and then I kept working on that as I went through different organizations, is there's a fairly significant knowledge deficit about what are the best business practices, particularly in mid-market companies. The typical model is it's an entrepreneurial startup and the family or the group builds the business up, and they all start out as really talented technicians. But in terms of the management background, it's pretty limited. So those two areas are really what I've concentrated on, building leadership teams and building knowledge of best practices. Give you an example. 2 years ago, I was teaching a class out at Sac State in an MBA program, 32 students. And so I asked them, how many of you have the title manager? All but one. All but one. So I said, okay, how many of you were trained to be a manager before you became one? What do you think? Nada. Yeah, welcome to mid-market companies in the U.S. Amazing. It reminds me, I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma.
How small was it?
Baskin and Robbins only had one flavor. Sorry. Thanks, Michael. In this small town, in my neighborhood, there was a vacant lot, and all the guys showed up every Saturday morning to play baseball. And we figured it out. we'd choose up size, and we'd play ball, play ball, play ball. And them, in their infinite wisdom, my parents moved us all to to California from Oklahoma. And I got to middle school, and there we had coaches. I got to high school, we had coaches in uniforms. Got to college, and oh my goodness, it was a whole different world. So what I saw, sandlot baseball, intermediate, advanced, and I didn't get to the professional ranks, but I saw the game played at the different levels. And that's the same thing I see in business. Some businesses are still playing the game of business at the sandlot level. And the opportunities by just deploying and following up on some of the best business practices makes a huge difference. So I get the privilege of coming along and introducing some businesses to things that they haven't discovered yet. I kind of am the chief knowledge officer, if you will, for our organization. My last major CEO job was in England. It was a financial services company. And I got there and I had a young, dynamic leadership team, but they were thin on the ground in terms of their understanding of some of the best practices to create predictable success. And you can always tell if a company is well managed is how predictable are their accomplishments. It's very systemic, and the more business systems you have in place and that you're tending, then the greater the predictability. Well, my first 10, 12 months with this particular company was spent training the leadership team. And I started writing what I call best practice summaries, because these guys, smart as they were, they couldn't do something they didn't know existed. So it was to provide some basic fundamental business knowledge. And I hadn't really found anything out there in 1 or 2 volumes. It's a whole bunch of stuff. And I've learned from my work that I can't suggest, okay, Roy, I would like for you to read these 2 books before our next meeting. So I had to make the knowledge accessible. So I started writing 20 years ago these 20-page white papers on each of the best practices. And based on what I had learned from my mentor 30-some years ago, one of the most high impact best practices was the one-on-one meeting. So I kept dabbling with that, working with it from company to company, and voila, this year I decided to put the book together. So you're going to see some of the stuff that I've been teaching for decades now that's really high impact. It's one of the top processes in a company to achieve a high performance culture, relationships, communicate. Well, you'll see the list. It's just amazing all the things you can affect in an organization through the one-on-one meeting system. Okay, have you read those books yet? Okay, there will be an exam, but the exam is out there in the business environment itself. So here we go. Our focus today, I had a guy that was one of my most exciting senior managers that I worked with in a retail company I ran some years ago. And he always said to his salespeople, because he ran about 300 sales people in our retail organization, he says, you either get what you want or you take what you get. And that's really what management's all about. How do you get what you want? And so many companies are just taking what they get. Well, I want to look at what world-class managers do, because they're the ones that can show us, here's the process, here's the steps. What are the specific behaviors? And why should I do that? And when should I do it? And how do I do that? We're going to drill down on that. Every day, your employees come to work And they're going to make a decision, how much am I going to contribute today? And what do you think that usually depends on? And this is a question I'd like to hear an answer to. What creates the desire for people to come to work and make a contribution? How motivated? What motivates them?
Feeling valued.
What else?
Knowing that they're
Huh?
making a contribution. Knowing that being there makes a difference.
It's how do we make them feel? How do we make our employees feel? Are they feeling valued? They feel like they're important to what we're doing? And what motivates them? These are from research by Dr. Hertzberg at the Harvard Business School, that number one is recognition, just recognizing what they're contributing, showing a little appreciation. Meaningful work is good, that they know that what they're doing is an important part of what the business is doing. And then somewhere down there, 4 or 5 is compensation. Compensation's important that at least we're paying prevailing wages. As long as we're doing that, these are the 3 motivators. So keep that in mind. How can we effectively provide recognition and appreciation? How many of you have heard this particular line? If you weren't doing a good job, I'd be sure to let you know. Hey, it lives. It's out there. I've heard it. And that's not uncommon at all, that businesses aren't aware of the potential that's there of making people feel good about where they work. I love my job is something we ought to be thinking about regularly. We're paying the price. Everybody's showing up. We're paying them. How do we help them feel like they really want to make a contribution? So the role of the manager, here's the opportunity. You've all heard of Gallup. They've done some incredible research. The manager is the high influencer. The manager is the person that helps people feel motivated about what they're doing. It's the focal point. And they're the ones that get to turn the talent into performance. Here's the big one. Gallup discovered the managers are the real reason why people stay or go in the organization. All the exit interviews, it's the manager. Why I'm staying or why I'm going. So keep that in mind. So what does support a liberating environment? That's what I'll call it. That liberates, hey, I want to make a contribution. Where people want to do their best and give their best. What does that? I get to see some pretty interesting cultures, and this company, IMS, is one of them. What do you think this is all about? This is pretty motivating. I don't know, how many IMS employees do we have in the room? All right. Yeah, how many companies get to do this? And a free lunch. Pretty neat, pretty neat. I can name a couple of other. Clark Pacific has an amazing culture. Sierra Nevada has an incredible culture. And in our Family Business Center leadership development class, we take field trips to go look at those businesses and feel it and see it. And you've been there. It's pretty amazing to see what some of these companies are doing to make their employees feel really good about where they work, feel valued. How do we show we care? How do we provide clear expectations of what we do? Mentor, coach, the list is pretty comprehensive about the things we can do to bring out the best. And that's one of the things that we want to consider is how do we bring out the best? How do our managers do that? Have we shown them how that happens? As the Chief Knowledge Officer, you guys, they always laugh when I think, I have a book I'd like to tell you about. I do this to them all the time in our leadership classes. But here's the interesting thing about knowledge. You could go no further than what you know. So where are you getting your information, your knowledge to grow? What's your process? of learning new things you can bring to the game. Well, this guy, Patrick Lencioni, this is his latest book. And I like to share and support guys who are really doing a nice job of educating us about how to make our employees feel good, motivated, want to make a contribution. He's got two high profile books. The other one's The 5 Dysfunctions of the Team, How to Build Great Teams. And it all kind of rolls into his latest one is The Advantage. And right down here at the bottom it says, why organizational health trumps everything else in business. Organizational health, how we feel about our business. And these are 7 of the major contributors that I've been tracking on for most of my career. We do a lot of surveys for companies, and what do you think is the weakest performance area in most organizations? Communication. Every time. I don't think we've ever taken a survey where communication, if it wasn't number 1, it was a strong number 2. And if you ask people what kind of communicators they are, oh, I'm pretty good. Yeah, better than 50%. Everybody thinks they're really good at it. But the proof is in the pudding. The surveys, it's way down there. And of course, if the communication is weak, how's the relationship, by the way? I depict the relationship as when Melinda and I have a relationship, it represents a conduit. As we work together, if we have a stressful relationship, but Roy and I have a robust relationship, my conduit's like this. We can throw notebooks through it. But Melinda and I are struggling to communicate and just really find that process where we can really exchange information effectively. So we've got this little pipette, and we can hardly stuff a piece of paper through. Our relationship hasn't been developed to the point that the trust level is there, that we can know that we have each other's best interest in mind. Well, I was talking with Don Clark this morning, and what he has shared with me many times about the relationship with him and his brother, who is just an incredible pairing. These guys made a blood pact 25 years ago. They'd let their brother always be right. Man, talk about harmony at the top. It is just magnificent. Always let your brother be right. Well, you know, I'm sure there's times when I might be a little more right this time, but they have attacked the heart of the issue of a relationship. There's nothing worth dying on this hill about. The relationship is number 1. As long as the relationship is intact, we can deal with the issues. So communication, relationships, good old management knowledge, that's important. What is our management model? How do we create predictability? Delegation is huge, making sure we're preparing that next generation of people to run the business. The most common cause of business failure is the business outgrows its people. That's where I've gotten a lot of my new jobs. As the business grew, the people didn't. So again, back to that knowledge issue. How do we keep that stuff growing and bringing new ideas and energy to the engagement? Accountability culture, keep getting better. These 7 issues, as we look at what we're going to accomplish through the one-on-ones, provide most of the content. So, 2 major objectives we have as managers. We want to bring out the best, and at the same time, we want to get a lot of quality work done. So if we can do that, we will increase the likelihood of being successful big time. And what's our intensity level? You know, some people are really into the game, others are just dogging it. How do we get the doggers to really get in the game? That's part of our challenge. What are we doing that will bring this guy up on all fours and get in the game? That's what managers need to be looking at. What's our system? Aristotle said we are what we repeatedly do. Take a look at what we're doing, and it's really interesting how many managers I find are on autopilot. They're going through the motions. They don't really step back and get perspective on, okay, what does my performance model look like? How am I contributing to our organization to get the very best results? Wake up, Hal. What are you doing this week? Because everything you did last week, that's been done. Now, what else is fresh and new and energetic? And we have options. What I find in most organizations is they do this stuff when they think about it, rather than having a system, a process, a way of addressing all of these important things. So I'm suggesting we might want to go through the door on the right. Let's develop a system. How do we accomplish the processes of helping our employees show up and feel appreciated, motivated, want to make a contribution, and create this exciting culture that's just a lot of fun to be a part of? And the one-on-one meeting system, that gets you out of the box and in the lead, and that's why it's a game changer. And if you don't have a copy, I know where I can get you one. So I always ask 3 questions. Why is this important with any best practice? Why is it important? What does it look like when you're doing it? How do we put it to work? Well, I'm glad you asked. Here we go. Harvard Business School, great source of information. I use their stuff all the time. There's some really, really fine research. Well, this is disturbing, but I find it's pretty real. They find that in most organizations, you lose about 1/3 of your productivity through all of these things. Insufficient planning, lack of clear expectations, very superficial communication, and low accountability. And I can tell you, for the last 12 years I've been helping a lot of different companies, I believe this. This is real. There's a lot of lost productivity because people just come to work and get into autopilot mode and really aren't plugged into how do we keep getting better. And Lencioni, in his book, Building Great Teams here, said if you could get all the people in an organization rowing in the same direction, you could dominate any market, any competition at any time. And I've seen it. There are a few organizations that have really done a great job of getting everybody in alignment and looking at what else can we do to keep getting better. And it works. The one-on-one meetings are the highest impact meeting of any type. Most effective communication, learning model. If you've ever been involved in a mentoring and coaching process on a one-on-one, it's really, really powerful. My first 2 books were on mentoring. I really spent a lot of time researching it. One of the businesses, I had a partner and I mentored his son for 8 years to be my replacement. I learned everything I possibly could about mentoring, and what I discovered when we ended the process and I got bought out and went to England is I probably should have done it sooner, because wow, this guy was really good. Well, I was fortunate that my partner's son was also very smart, but he was a learner, and just as much information and stuff as we could throw at him. And he was motivated because he knew he was going to be running this business someday. And his grandfather had started part of the business 30 years earlier, 40 years earlier, and a reputation in their family of successful business outcomes. So he was motivated. He wanted to do a good job. And he became one of the most interesting learners. And I'll never forget, it was music to my ears. And when we first started working together, he says, Hal, could you recommend a really good business book? There's several of us who would like to get together and read it, and then would you come and meet with us and we'll have a discussion about it. And this was back in the 80s. We hadn't started book discussion groups and that stuff yet. And I thought, wow. So I gave him Peter Drucker, Managing for Results. And it was amazing. That started, and for 3 or 4 years we did that. In the last meeting I had with a group, there were over 30 people in the room doing that. We did it about every 6 weeks. Can you think of the impact? Well, I do know another organization that's done something very similar, and you happen to be visiting them today. Of all the companies I've seen that have done something that's really grabbed their bootstraps and helped pull them up, is Roy got the message. I need to help my people keep learning. So they started doing stuff like this, handing out books. And they didn't eat the books, they read the books. And just started by osmosis, started putting it into practice. And it makes a huge difference. If you know about something, there's a pretty good chance you might even try it. But if you don't know it, there's not a ghost of a chance you're even going to come close to it unless you see somebody else doing it and you might emulate that. So knowledge is huge, and the learning model through the 101 is significant. I want you to know I didn't just dream all this stuff up. In fact, this is over 3,000 years old. I like to go to the wisdom literature and Proverbs. It points us to everything, strategic planning, you name it. But in terms of developing the kind of relationship in a business that people want to give their best, whoever loves discipline loves knowledge. Know well the condition of your flocks, your people. Wise men will hear an increase in learning. So we've got 3,000-year-old literature that reinforces what I'm sharing with you, and it ain't my original idea at all. I'm just passing it on. But I can tell you with hand in the air, it works. Now, one of the first misconceptions that people often pick up in the one-on-one is it's the same from top to bottom. Nope. It's different at least at 3 levels, and I'll explain. The leadership level, the strategic level up here at the top would be the leadership team and their direct reports. They're dealing with strategy. Is where are we going to be next week, next month, next year? They're looking ahead. What comes after next? And they need to keep working on that, reinventing the business. Well, the next level down, the operations guy, they're working on how good can we make today and tomorrow? How do we keep this running really, really well? So their focus on their agendas is going to be a little different. Down here on the frontline performance, these are the guys out there running the lawnmowers, running the roofing crews, running the concrete molds over at Clark Pacific. And those are usually 1-on-5s or 1-on-7s team meetings. The other interesting aspect that I'll share with you is in the case of Nicole here, if she and I were in a reporting relationship and Nicole's reporting to me, she prepares the agenda. She's responsible for bringing all the information to me about what we ought to be meeting on regularly. I'll shoot her an email and say, hey, Nicole, add this to our agenda. But we're trying to build a robust agenda that will guide our discussion and building our relationship, helping our communication, all the things you saw on the list. We're going to talk about delegation, we're going to talk about accountability, and those are the things that need to be visited regularly and not by chance. But we have a system of reviewing that. So what do they look like? How do we communicate job expectations? Well, hopefully not over the phone. It's really interesting to see how different companies approach this. Some have job descriptions, but you know how often they get looked at out there in industry. A job description usually is used to hire somebody, then it goes in a bottom drawer. And maybe you'll look at it when there's a vacancy again. So that takes care of job descriptions. And then the annual review, okay, that's how we're telling our employees what they're responsible for and giving them feedback. 2 things employees want to know. I bet you're interested in knowing that. I'll get to it. We can't achieve high accountability without consequences. And how do we deal with those if we don't have a positive relationship to talk about that? One of my colleagues in Leadership One, when he was getting his psychology degree, shared with me one of his classes. I'm going to take a drink. There were 11 students, and when they all came in, each student got a little pigeon in a cage as part of their class project. And their objective, in order to pass this class, they had to teach the pigeon how to play the piano that semester. Well, interestingly, pigeons do not respond to negative stimuli, only positive. So what's the positive kind of stimuli you can use to motivate a pigeon to go over and peck on the piano and get some grain? Yeah, food, that would do it. But that's positive. And you kind of transfer into the boardroom now of the business. How positive are reinforcements to get our employees and associates heading down the positive path? Well, bringing out the best is what we're trying to do. Again, some proverbs: pleasant words, sweet to the soul, healing to the bones. Do not withhold good. And two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. Anyway, one-on-ones. So again, I refer back to some wisdom literature to reinforce how we want to put this to work. So 2 questions the employees want to know: what do you expect of me, and how am I doing? They'd like to know that pretty regularly. And how we do that to let people know, and I can remember my first job, it's a stretch, but I can, that I had to go in after a year and ask my boss, is there anything I'm doing I could be doing better, differently, more of, or something? Had no feedback, and that's the first time I heard, well, Hal, if you weren't doing okay, we'd let you know. Big opportunity missed because I was kind of a motivated, competitive guy, and I was always looking, how can I excel? And they weren't feeding that fire at all. So 2 things we want as managers is we want to develop more capacity from our people and we get more work done so we can grow. But we know they have to be capable of doing that. Here's the big obstacle: superficiality. I see it in so many areas of business practices. There's kind of a slapdash effort, oh yeah, we'll do that, we'll try that, and it's just, we tried that, did it, it didn't work very well, and so they've been kind of inoculated against some of the better business practices by not really drilling down and finding out how to deploy them most effectively. Everything from staff meetings. Ask you a question. How are most of your meetings? Are they really well thought out agendas, planned, anticipating? What can we do to make this a robust meeting? Well, Patrick Lencioni wrote another book called Death by Meeting. Great book. And it's because most meetings are deadly. Another example of ill preparation. If we're going to do something, why don't we really think it through? How can we do the best possible job? And exceptional performance, if you don't know it, is intentional. I don't know if we've got any 49ers fans in the room, but a lot of intentional preparation. And if there's ever an intense manager, there's one. So the process starts with a well-developed agenda. Jennifer, how am I doing time-wise? Okay, almost there? 5 minutes, okay. So one of the processes I go through with companies that are implementing this is we go through several iterations of what kind of agendas will release the kind of processes we want. What are the most important things you're doing? And it varies from business to business. But usually it will include these kinds of things. You have a strategic plan, that means you have an implementation plan. You should be looking at that pretty regularly. On the job description, and of course these guys know a job description can be revised to become a performance agreement. And on the performance agreement, it's expected results. Okay, we can review expected results, give feedback. What's your growth area? What are you working on in your development? So these are all kinds of ideas that I think I give a couple of examples in the back of the book of some of those agendas, but that's where we get to be creative. What are the drivers that Ryan and I ought to be talking about regularly will help him be successful and therefore help my company be successful? And we will explore that until we come up with the right blend, the right mix. Usually takes about 2 to 3 months to keep working on the agenda till you get it so it's zeroed in on the right stuff. But keep looking at it and ask yourself, is this getting us where we need to go? The manager direct report relationship. In this reporting relationship that Ryan and I have, my challenge is how can we make this relationship as effective as possible? And I'm struggling with a client right now that they've been together over 20 years on the leadership team, and they're still struggling with trust. Amazing. That still happens in a lot of organizations, that there's barriers to them having the kind of relationships of high trust and contribution and you can count on me kind of an environment. And as leaders, our opportunity is keep looking for those answers. Clarify your direction, and we need to identify when and where performance guidance occurs. And that can happen in the one-on-one relationship. So here's the catalyst. I put down, okay, what are the 9 things that I want to make sure happen in a one-on-one meeting? You've got the list. You can take it home with you. You can memorize it. You can even have it tattooed in the palm of your hand, which I recommend managers have the 5 functions of management tattooed there. But anyway, in your one-on-ones, make sure you understand this. It's a scheduled event. You can count on it. You know I'm going to meet with you, whether it's every Tuesday at 9 or every other Tuesday at 9, but some kind of regularity. Ken Monroe, the president of Holt Caterpillar, he meets with his direct reports once a month because they just happen to be scattered around Northern California, so he can't get there every week. With my direct reports that were down the hall, I met with them every week for half an hour. So it varies from company to company based on proximity. And it consolidates a bunch of ad hoc meetings. It's, hey Hal, you got a minute? Hey Hal, I need to see you. And there's 3 people waiting at my door. No. Time out, everybody. Let's get organized. Let's figure out a way that we can come prepared to these meetings. Sure, there are emergency meetings from time to time, but we can get organized. And here's what some of my best users of this system do. They keep a little running list. Oh, I need to put that on our agenda. They don't wait till an hour before the meeting. They have a running list. Here's the thing. So when I get in there with that meeting with Hal, George, or Roy, I have prepared and I get it to them a day in advance. But it creates process. It creates focus. It creates thinking ahead. Direct reports have significant face time. So when Ryan finally comes in and we all sit down to meet, he knows he's got my undivided attention, and I promise to give that to him every other week according to our schedule. When I was introduced to this, I was the city administrator of Portland, Oregon, and I worked for 5 elected officials. That it was a real zoo. And I was trying to get things organized in communication. So I applied this moving up my bosses above me. I got 45 minutes a week of their time. And that really had high impact of creating relationships that were very productive. Enables preparation, planning, addresses the important stuff. It's a setting to build trust-based relationships. creates a sense of significance. We're going to have these meetings and they're going to be significant. And it shows you really care. Back to the 7 areas, they're in your material. Communication, relationships, management, delegation. Really study those and think about how can I impact my reporting relationship in those 7 areas. Here's some advice that really will add to the impact. Be prepared. Make them great meetings. You'll have to cancel from time to time, but do it well. Reschedule. Make them important. Make them meaningful. And when Ryan leaves the meeting room, I want him to walk out of there feeling, wow, I am really happy I get to be in this work environment. The double whammy. Too busy to get the job done. One of my favorite cartoons is the answer is being handed to the guy and he says, no thanks, we're too busy. Does that happen ever very often? I hope to snort. Yeah, it happens. So watch your system. That's why we're here to challenge you, is think through where you can apply some of this thinking to impact your contribution where you are. Thank you.